to Opinionated. My name is Tibor, I'm your host, and my guest today in the studio is David Cake, who is an internet activist. Hi, David.
Hi.
The second half of our last program of this second series is dealing also not just with 5G, but big data. And big data is so important, I think. But before we start the discussion on big data, we're going to see a short video which explains all the dangers of big data. Let's see it.
All this data that we're now generating out in the world, why is it that everybody's using this data except us? Every time there's a new technology, there's always danger involved in it. I'm very concerned that the people that are spending most of the time right now speaking and focusing and thinking about big data are large companies and governments. And that's fine, but this is going to affect our lives, our parents, our kids, and I think we should all be involved in this conversation right now. I'll give you one example why. Somebody told me last week that there are banks that when you apply for a loan, if they try to look at your Facebook page, if you haven't, cloaked it, and if you listen to rap music, they will lower your rating score. But there are people making decisions, writing algorithms, putting laws, sort of software laws in place that with no regulation and no oversight, and this is some well-meaning programmer who thought, oh, I'm going to protect my bank. But you don't even know this happened. So all this data that we're now generating out in the world, why is it that everybody's using this data except us? There's an example in my book, Human Face of Big Data, of a gentleman who has a wireless pacemaker. So throughout the day, his pacemaker transmits his data to his doctor. So he decided that he would measure his exercise, his sleep, his alcohol consumption, and then see if he could map it against when his pacemaker kicked in. So he called the manufacturer and said, could I have a copy of the data you've been collecting about my heart for the last 6 months because I want to see if any of my behavior affects it. And they said, sorry, sir, this is our proprietary data. He said, wait a second, this is my heart. You've been collecting data about my heart, and they're refusing to give it to him. So that's an interesting story about him in particular, but it kind of speaks to this larger issue of who does own our data, who's benefiting from it, who's trading in it, and why do we have no say one over who gets it, and shouldn't we benefit it? And maybe if I got 10% of Google's selling my browser history, I'd be happy about it. But it seems like this conversation is not happening amongst us, and I think it needs to be. I worry about the fact that in some countries in the world, hopefully not our country, imagine what a boon to a country like China, where people are now planting trackers on themselves, where the government knows where you've been, who you've talked to, what you've read, what you spent money on. You think about it, if 8 years ago someone said, could I plant a tracker on you so I'd have all this information? You'd say, no way. And now we spend, people sleep in line for the privilege of buying these trackers to plant on themselves. We do it because it's convenient, but what are we trading on the other side? I don't have any answers to this. I was lucky enough to go out and talk to a lot of people, DJ Patil and Tim O'Reilly and Juan Enriquez and Esther Dyson, all these really interesting thinkers in this space, and asked each of them to tell us the good side and the bad side. Esther Dyson talks about the fact that we're now seeding the world with these almost completely free sensors that are now starting to talk to each other and change their behavior based on each other. So we're not the center of the data conversation anymore. It's like Skynet. A lot of this has the potential to solve all of humanity's problems or create a whole other set. I think that all we need is really one terrible example of the abuse of all this information, and things will go backwards really fast. And that's why we did this Human Face of Big Data project. I think we all need to be talking about this right now and not just letting it happen in the background and think, oh, we'll figure this out later. Hi, I'm Rick Smolin. Please subscribe to Thinker.
So David, what do you think about the revelations of Rick Smolin, who is, by the way, the publisher, or the writer, not the publisher, of this great book, Human Face of Big Data?
There's an awful lot to say about big data.
Even human face?
Well, you've got to find a title for your book.
I love that.
And it's a technical question, but it's got all sorts of practical implications. How else do you express that in a title?
But David, I think everyone sitting in front of this television and watching us want to know really what the hell is big data. It's a simple name, but what is it?
It just means that now that we have huge amounts of computing power and it's all hooked up, we are able to process amounts of data that a decade or two ago would have seemed inconceivably large.
So where big data lives, what's the address? Can we talk to big data? Or big data is something which is hiding somewhere?
We talk to big data every day. It's Google.
It's Google. So
it's Facebook. Whenever they say, this is a global trend, this is what's trending right now, that's big data. And actually one of the things that it gets used for the most is just to decide which ads we should see. It looks through all of our data, it looks through, correlates all the things we look at with enormous amounts of other information and decides what we might like to buy.
But where this data is kept? Because, the gold used to kept in the banks. Now it's not, because gold is not so relevant, except the dollar, United States of America's dollar. So where we keep the big data?
Some people have described it like the new oil. You have to prospect and find where there are big deposits. There are all sorts of interesting places where this big data lives, right? There's all sorts of organisations. Credit agencies are one of them, but also like hospitals, medical systems that have got a huge amount of data on us.
But are they just buying it or borrowing it?
Well, they're generally just getting to make use of it. There's a whole bunch of different trends. One is that we've got so much more computing power. One is that we've got so much, and we collect so much more information. We found out ways to make money out of it, particularly through advertising marketing. Another one is that we're able to process this massive amounts of data because we have, what we often get called artificial intelligence. Computer scientists tend to often not use that term directly and talk about machine learning, but we don't worry about the fact that it might rise up and have its own agenda. We worry about it being used as a tool by people who already have their own agenda.
That's very good. But Dave, sorry about my persistence on want to find out more about the big data. So if we got big data which is coming from the users, from us, from the 7 billion people on Earth, whoever has got the access for the technology from the 7 billion. So big data, we're producing it. We let that someone harvesting it. So we're producing it, we're providing it, someone is harvesting. Then someone is storing it and someone selling it. Are they auctioning it or just selling it, direct?
It depends. They're doing whatever they think they can use it helpfully for.
So how much does a big data cost?
Well, it depends what you want. I
want to have all the data in Perth. Everyone who lives in Perth and uses Facebook, I would like to have the data. How much I have to pay for that?
There's no one place that has all the data. There are people that are trying to build their empires out of data. Facebook, Google, Apple,
but theoretically,
Microsoft, Amazon. There's government agencies that already have enormous amounts of data. And government agencies, obviously, like the Bureau of Statistics.
It or they just collecting it?
It depends. Some agencies are just collecting data in the normal course of what they do.
Transactions.
So one of the things that is sort of a controversial issue, and particularly in the UK at the moment, is health services collect an enormous amount of data in the course of their day-to-day what they do. They collect information about patients, they track what medicines they use, they often are able to, through repeat contact with the medical system, get all this information about their entire life. Now, that's we all understand that happens.
Yeah.
When we go to the hospital or doctor, they have a big file on us.
So
but somehow,
all the
as it's got computerized, then it gets sort of put together into giant sort of lakes of data, and then someone like Google comes along and says, actually, we think we could do a bit of mining in that data. We might be able to find some money. We might be able to find some insights that are hidden that we can then turn into money. And they're right. And in some ways, this is a good thing. I mean, they may be, they set their big artificial intelligence computer on this huge pile of data, and somewhere they go, oh, look, people who are getting this medication for something unrelated, they got better with this other disease. Look, we found out that's useful, and we're all better off. That sort of thing. They're able to find information we don't know, and that can be great. But they're doing it for money. They're not doing it for free.
No.
So, and this is not data that they collected. This is data that was collected for an entirely different purpose. And suddenly, why are we letting them use it to make money? Why isn't the information that they discover hiding in that pile of data, why isn't it ours? Why don't we get a share?
Because we're signing some documents when we are registered with...
Well, we're not always signing those documents.
No, because I didn't sign anything with Google.
Yes, exactly. And these are the sort of debates that we need to have right now. Who is taking that money and making money out of it? Why are they able to make this money out of data we gave them and we're not getting a cut? Or maybe... And often they may be taking this information and, actually locking it up behind patents and other sort of legal controls that say they own it now. We don't get any say. So there's a whole bunch of very complicated issues here about, if this is going to be a basis for this huge expanding sort of sector of the economy, how are we going to do it fairly?
So if we're supplying the data, which is our copyright, I assume, then Google theoretically can
would not assume it's our copyright. That's a
but they can
question.
Patent our copyright.
Well, they can patent information they discover from our data.
Yes, as a collection.
They can also sell that information to us, back to us as marketing. They take our data, they use that, sell that to marketers, or use it to sell their advertising. The advertising industry is essentially being entirely taken over by Google and Facebook and these other companies. Then there's companies like Amazon who almost skip the bit where they sell it to advertisers and just use it to sell us things directly. There's all sorts of people trying to make money out of it, and in some ways you're sort of like, well, they've got to make money, and actually being sold things that they're pretty sure I actually want. Maybe that's better than being advertised stuff that I don't want. But someone is making money, and it's not necessarily us, even though the data is ours. Google and Facebook, we give them a lot of that information. Facebook especially, that's their whole business model. We give them all the information.
So we signed for Facebook, so that's why we
and they are able to do that. But gradually that's expanding more and more, and the ways we might give them data, thinking we know what's going on, but the ways they are able to use that data may really surprise us. For example, there's a lot of things where they analyze photos that we've given them and find people that we didn't, they go, oh, well, this face here matches this face here. We didn't tell them that. They've worked it out. Google does an enormous amount of analysis of anything about how people move around and information that they went around and drove around all the streets and took photos, and now they're starting to do really some complicated analysis, work out where all the what all the street signs say and what all the street numbers are, and they know things about our cities that we necessarily didn't tell them. And now where this 5G starts to come in is it joins together a few other trends. Suddenly, there's a trend we talk about called the Internet of Things, which really is, instead of putting internet connections and computers in devices that we interact with, like telephones and computers and so on, more and more we're starting to put computers and internet connections in just all sorts of things, right? We put them in.
Okay, David, that's all interesting. Just for the last question, what is for you, or for your opinion, is the biggest danger of big data? One sentence, if it's possible.
The biggest danger is that people will learn things about us that we never knew that we told them, and then will make use of us in ways that we would never have allowed.
Can we do something against that?
We can, but it will require, I mean, really only government can do something about it. All we can do is give them less data, but that somehow often is not practical.
Thank you, David. Thanks for coming onto the show. And now we're going to the short break, but please stay with us, because after the break, we're coming back with the third part of this last episode of the second round of Opinionated. And we have to say thank you for our sponsors, Nangala Maya, CBF, who even give us money as a sponsor, First Nations Homeless Project, and last but not least, the Institute of Social Justice and Human Rights.